podcast from Drew and Mike is, I think it's really cool, and that is what I wanted to say.
Two and a mic. Two, 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 two and a mic. Two, 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 two and a mic. Well, having Vlad on is always such an interesting experience. Today we talk about French fascism, whether it's on the growth or just a predictable response to liberal elitism. In this podcast and the next few, we hover around these issues with distance objectivity. It just seems easier to analyze things, especially when we're talking about ideologies which can be extremely divisive in a semi-academic way, and this is what we try to do here. If you may remember, with Vlad, we were going through island state systems where we wanted to create our own systems. And Vlad and I had written down a number of rules or principles that we want to establish. In this one, we analyze my next point in this particular series. And Vlad highlights some of the weaknesses of my approach. And also how some of my concepts are perhaps more idealistic than he would normally countenance. But at the end, politics is a game of opinions. And so therefore, it's always interesting to hear one or two or 10 which are counter to mine. Without further ado, I will leave our talk to speak for itself. Thank you, Vlad, and I hope all of you enjoy it. Vladimir, it's so good to have you back on. Your voice is music to my ears, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here again. What about you? How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. I'm busy, but not as busy as you. You have a capacity to work which is beyond human. Do they call you Super Vlad in the office?
No, they don't call me like that. But yeah, no, it's from time to time you have to go the extra mile in order to achieve some stuff. And yeah, now I'm facing such a phase. So but it's gonna be over soon, and then I'm proud of my work, and yeah.
Always proud of your work, Vlad. You should definitely wear a cape. I don't know if that's a part of your office attire, but
Not
I think
really.
no. Maybe you could introduce it. I don't know. Some people should wear a cape because they're super. It doesn't matter. Forget it. Anyway, so ridiculous concept. Who would think of that? So I mean, we obviously have our series which refers specifically to the creation of our island societies, and that will continue. But before we come to that, the political changes that are underway in certain places, these are always topics of interest. Sort of thinking about what events have to occur for societies to make significant shifts in their collective thoughts, collective ideologies. And it's not always the case that you can see these things developing before your eyes. And yeah, so I'm not going to ask for predictions for what's going to happen on Sunday in the French elections, because it makes no sense. By the time I've edited this, the election will have passed, and any prediction we make will be obsolete. But what we can talk about is why, perhaps in France, significant changes have occurred. Now, regardless of what the result is, enough people in France over the last 10 years have felt themselves under or misrepresented by centre and centre-left political ideologies. And this is now the second time in a row that Marine Le Pen has been in the runoff, in the second round, as it were, of the election. So there's significant enough votes to push her slightly more, shall we say, aggressive right-wing agenda forward. That's it, significant enough to talk about a shift, isn't there, in sort of the French political ideology?
For sure, yeah. Well, first of all, I would say that for me, that wouldn't be a problem if she wins, because that's part of democracy, the system you love. So,
so it's my fault. Okay.
No, not really. But I would be very careful in perceiving such shifts as problematic or as a problem, right? The way democracy works is we have candidates, they are trying to propose something, and people have the right to vote, and they can choose if they go for person A or person B. If it's Macron or Le Pen, this is a thing that they should people decide. So yes, it's for sure a shift. That's also good, I guess. It's a good. Not I'm not talking about the content. I'm not talking about anything, but that's a like a huge challenge for all politicians to stay accountable, to stay close to the people, to stay close to the needs of the people. And for sure, you always have from time to time politicians that are just using the situation to take advantage of it and being populist, a word that I don't really like, because at the end, every politician is populist. And yeah, I guess we have to accept that's the way society works. And if people are they don't feel represented by some political authorities parties, then it's normal that they go and look for another options.
Mm. I mean, a lot of people will listen to those words and think, "Oh, who is this guy? Is he some kind of crazy right-wing nut or something?" But that's absolutely not what you are saying.
No.
What you're talking about is a sort of academic analysis of the system. And so, therefore, if you have a democratic system that suggests that at least in election times, the people have the right to choose, and if you have a legitimate political party which is running a legitimate ballot, whether or not people outside of that country or outside of that particular structure find one of those participating parties to be distasteful is irrelevant, as long as they follow the democratic system, which they suggest that they are, right?
Right. If they follow the rules, the democratic system, and they are really like taking part of the game, then it should be more than good. If they win, then we need to respect that. I
Mm.
mean, you have one vote, so use it. If better if you are informed about it, but that's not always the case. I mean, not talking about you because I know you really are into politics and you enjoy the topic and so on. But vast majority of people, when they go to the polls to vote, they don't really know what they are voting, and this is also a problem that I have slightly perception. You know, when politicians like are more in the center or even center left, they win, then it's also fine. But if you have a right wing politician that win an election, then people are stupid, they are not informed, they are frustrated, they are, and this is just too arrogant from this, let's say, established left movements or let's say established left environment that we are having in Europe for, I don't know, the past maybe 6 7 decades.
Mm. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? People really do lack objectivity, especially when we're talking about political ideas. We're talking about power. We're talking about the way society is organized, but also we're talking about ourselves. I mean, if we are faced at work with a new software package, for example, which is going to significantly improve the way we do our jobs, lots of people will still be resistant to using it because it means extra effort. So that means we inherently lack objectivity because we don't necessarily see what is better or worse, even if these two concepts exist. We just simply cannot understand why people collectively would have an opinion which goes contrary to my own, especially as my opinion has been pretty much representative of my community, as you say, for the last 60, 70 years. How can you possibly disagree with me? Yeah, there is a lot of conservatism with a small c within, human nature. That's just how it is, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's if you remember I guess that was like the first or the second session we did with this island exercise that I was talking about that everybody should have the right to earn the right to vote. So that's a thing you cannot avoid right now. Like people are lacking, they are lacking on knowledge, on objectivity, and so on. And yeah, that's part of the democracy, the way we have it nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I find it fascinating. Um, because you do bring it back around to that particular point, which is that, people need to be able to qualify themselves to vote. And the way that that qualification process takes place is exhibiting enough knowledge and understanding of the parties involved. And also, I guess, the reason why you vote. Um, but sort of rather than rehashing a previous episode, as you said, we've spoken about it before. So if people are listening now and they haven't heard it, please go back and listen to our previous discussions on this topic, because Vlad's idea is better analyzed there, and definitely deserves being given a chance. Yeah, I also, I mean, I look back, obviously lots of people look back at the 1920s and 1930s in Europe, but specifically in Germany, when they talk about how an extreme right-wing organization comes in and pretty much takes the reins of power. And then obviously the Second World War took place, and the Holocaust and the horrific events that took place during the Second World War. And for this reason, Europe has always set itself against allowing extreme right-wing organizations to come into power. And this is why there is inherently this distaste for any party which has sort of automatically disqualification for foreigners, a lack of tolerance, a lack of respect of human rights for people who are not, shall we say, of the indigenous population, and so on. There is this fear, and considering some of the historical events that I mentioned, that fear is justifiable. But the situation in Germany in the 1920s is very different to the situation of France today in the 2010s and 2020s. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's quite different, but maybe one comment, if I may.
Please.
I would be very careful with that belief. I know this is it would be probably also my perception, but we would say like, okay, Germany, it's like be careful not that you don't get too righty. Let's say it like this. But at the end, it's like the party that was the largest time, the major time in office in the Second World War is the CDU, right? And the CDU, however you want to plan and however you want to explain it, it's not left, it's not center. It's a very clear right party, right oriented party without being extremist, right? So that's the thing that that we should, at least from my perspective, we should avoid like putting like a left is cool, right is bad, and it's yeah. I just don't believe in two things. I don't believe that Germany turned into more center or left direction. I think there is a very clear trend in Germany since always being more right oriented. You can also see like Merkel during the last years of her government, she was a bit more like going to the center, and the one of the consequences that then the CDU lost the election, right? So people are always like finding the sweet spot, like being right, but without being recognized as right people. And yeah, it was just important to me to make that that comment that um, that's not really true from my understanding that that Germany is not really cool with right. And yeah, and the other thing is that yeah, history is large, is huge, and history didn't start with the Second World War. And if you analyze the history of Europe, maybe in the past 3, 4, 5 centuries, is yeah, a lot of countries organizing war after war and being like a yeah, finding the smallest excuse to start a war against people and so on. So yeah, just to be very very careful will this in my opinion wrong perception that the that here in Europe we are peaceful and right orient and left oriented.
Yeah, absolutely. I would never dare to say that in Europe we are peace oriented specifically. I think, as you say, just looking back at the last 300 or 400 years of European history, yeah, it's very clear that there are some extremely powerful imperialistic influences. And more than that, governments have been dominated by a will to force themselves upon supposedly weaker nations and benefit from it financially and socially.
True.
Yeah. But we could talk, we have to do, because in our previous podcast, you also talked about Europe. I'm not going to say you're anti-European because I think you
No, I
enjoy
love it.
Europe. You love
Yeah.
Europe, right? Yeah. But you did point out, and it was a great, it was a great sentence, that the Renaissance was an opportunity for Europe to put itself in the center of the world. And
Exactly.
I found that to be an extremely entertaining statement. So we're gonna have to come back to that one, Vlad. Yeah, because I want to hear some of your thoughts on
Sure.
European development. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, so moving it along, yeah. So we'll see on Sunday what happens with France, and then maybe we can come back to analyzing exactly why whatever happens may have happened. But back to our islands. So because I've got a couple more points on my list than you do, we're going to go into attacking my list a little bit. Yeah.
Cool.
So if we get through one, maybe we can consider doing another or not, but it doesn't matter. There's no rush. So my point number 6, I'll quickly read it.
Yeah.
And then we can go into it. So individual enterprise must provide a fair share to society and respect the dignity of employees and those directly affected by the processes and results of business operations, whether they are able to communicate or not.
Yeah. Okay, I have the first question I would have. You say like they need to provide a fair share to society. Are you talking about taxes or is this something different?
Okay, if the tax system that we are familiar with was
Mhm.
fair, then I would say yes. But I don't think the tax system is fair. And so therefore I would say no.
Are we talking about the German tax system
I'm talking
or
about West European democratic tax systems because they all, for some reason, suffer from similar deficiencies, which is essentially those individuals or organizations that are quite wealthy have access to possibilities with regards to, shall we say, manipulating the system legally, even where they don't have to pay a certain amount of tax, at least that the amount of tax that they should pay. And I'll give you an example.
please?
Amazon. I think Amazon has paid a negligible amount of tax over the last, I don't know how many years. However, the boss of Amazon is a multi-billionaire. And so therefore, I'm sure he must have paid taxes on his individual income, because that would be simply crazy if that did not happen. However, how is it possible that his company made no money and yet he's a billionaire? So therefore, I can only imagine there must be some kind of loophole in the system which allows for that money to be funneled out of that particular account and into other accounts.
Yeah, I get the point. It's a very difficult one because I really think that we need to be careful. I know that's not what you are doing, but I would be sure that we don't start like criminalizing successful people or people that are running very big companies, right? Because when we talk about, okay, they must provide a fair share to society. I mean, if we continue talking about Amazon. Okay, you have that guy, and you have 2 million people that are employed working at Amazon. If you wouldn't have that guy, I don't know what would you do to organize 2 million of how do you call it, employments or vacancies or yeah. So maybe a question: do you think this is also very important that we need to talk to the positive social impact that such a person like Jeff Bezos have on society?
Look, I take this argument from a slightly different perspective, okay? Because I understand how regional governments give large organizations tax subsidies so that they can establish their factories, their warehouses, their operations in their region. And this is like a draw. On the other hand, I'm also familiar with occasions that companies have gone into a certain region, they've been given a tax subsidy, they've been told for the first 5 years of their operations, and then as soon as the 5 years are up, boom, they're out of there. Yeah, and these things have happened in Germany. I think Nokia was one of those organizations that had that particular kind of activity here. And as much as during those 5 years, the local region benefited from those jobs, but then after Nokia left, that had a very negative effect on the community, perhaps even more so than the positive side. If a government or a regional government is in a position that it can give tax subsidies to organizations simply to bring them in, then there must on the other side also be a certain amount of finance which they can directly use to employ people into doing local social work, which can also be beneficial, both to them as individuals and to the society in which they live. As in, I accept, of course, that you need to have entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are in many ways a bit like artists, aren't they? You need to give them their room to do their work. You need to have that creativity that they provide the market to expand, to introduce new ways of doing things. And so when I say fair goes many ways. Fair is not just to the people, fair is not just to the government, fair is also to the companies and to the entrepreneurs. So, they have to be also rewarded for the work that they do. I just find that there are too many cases within any society that you look at in a Western democracy where the number of people who are either millionaires or extremely wealthy is quite large and getting larger. And the number of people who are significantly below the poverty line is also getting larger. And that I find unacceptable. There's no reason why somebody should be paid 2 or 3 million euros or pounds a year on the one hand, but on the other side, you've got 1 million families that have to eat a certain amount of food, which is not enough for them and their family. They don't have enough money for their energy bills, and they can't clothe their family properly for them to go to school. That's just not right.
Yeah, I get your point, and for sure I'm with you. But the thing is that the way a system works, the way an economy works, is a bit more complex. And if I would reduce the salary of the upper management of a huge corporation, that's it's not like it's happened automatically. Then we are going to reduce poverty. So one thing that I really learned during the time I was focusing on studying political science and so on, is that poverty is not a money problem. Poverty is really a extremely complex, difficult problem to understand, and you are not going to solve a poverty with money. Even people that are starving, the problem is not the food, as crazy as it sounds. The problem are the structures that we have in the world that are not working good enough. And the thing is that if, I don't know, imagine the managing director, I don't know, president, or how you call it, from Deutsche Bank or something, someone that I can imagine is doing like 10 million a year, something like this. And if we would reduce that to 5 million, then okay, let me know how do you want to do it to assure that this 5 million is going to the people that you were mentioning before. That would be beautiful if that would work that way, but that isn't the case.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. I don't think money automatically is a solution to any problem. It can alleviate short-term issues. But as you say, if you give a poor family, 10,000 euros, I'm sure for the next 10 to 12 months, they will have enough money to be able to pay for their food requirements and clothing and so on. But then after that period, they're still going to be poor. They're still going to need support. And so the solution cannot simply be give these people another 10,000 euros, because society simply cannot afford for that to happen for the amount of people that they have who are below the poverty line. So you're right. There must be a structural change. It must be a structural shift. But we have to recognize this collectively. There's this element of collective responsibility simply doesn't exist, because we are always taught, look after yourself, look after number one. You have to win. And I think the mentality that we teach our younger generations to observe and to follow doesn't necessarily benefit the society in which we live.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was just being careful with it because I think the reason why we have poverty is not that we have billionaires or that we have people not paying taxes. This is a problem, but this is not the origin of the problems that we are talking about. It's not that the people are all starving because Jeff Bezos isn't paying taxes, right? And if we talk, for example, about let's talk about Germany, for example. It's like here. I know it's not perfect, but if I compare, maybe I'm biased because I'm from Colombia and I know in Colombia that's like a totally different world. But if you are here in Germany. Like you have access to public education, to public schools, you have access to public university. You can even do a PhD without paying anything. And then even if all those things never work out for you, and for some reason you are like, okay, you have no job, you have anything, then there's still a lot of help here. And I'm not saying that people living from such kind of how do you call, like, social aid that they are receiving from the state, from the government, for sure they are not having the most beautiful time in their lives, but they are getting the minimum to have a life with dignity. And I know it's very difficult and awful to be poor within the fourth biggest economy of the world, but I mean there's a lot of things that are going very good, and I just, it's not that I'm optimistic, but I really feel proud about what we have achieved as society during the past decades. Imagine, I'm not talking compared now to 2000 years before, but just take it like 150 years ago. Imagine you and me, we wouldn't be here. It's like some 200 years ago, maybe I wouldn't have access to glasses, right? And if I don't have access to glasses, I'm not able to read, I'm not able to go to school, I'm not able to learn anything. And if you compare all the biggest or most important, let's say, measurements that you have on, I don't know, access to education, people, nutrition, and so on, we are, it's really amazing what we have achieved. The thing is that, okay, there's room for improvement, right? But I just would be, I don't know, I wouldn't be a friend of thinking that that all the things that we're having now are going bad, because I think we are really in a good way.
I get that. My point, though, is that we have these organizations which are, making these wonderful developments. For example, as you said, your glasses, microscopes, satellites, telecommunications, all of these wonderful things that companies can create. But who are they creating them for? Essentially, they're creating them for a human civilization And it seems to me far too many members of that human civilizations represent, if not necessarily slaves, because I want to be very careful with using that word. Not necessarily slaves, but something very close to slavery. And some people would say that in certain parts of the world, we still do have slavery. And I would be inclined to agree with that. But I wouldn't want to paint that, slavery with the same brush that you would have somebody who lives in Berlin, for example, who works 10 or 12 hours a day, but then they go home and, sit down in front of their, the warm fire, put their feet up and have a sip of whiskey or something. That's not exactly what you would call slavery. So I'm talking about
Were you describing me?
Yeah, absolutely. But not just you. But as in, that's not what I'm referring to when I say slavery. I'm referring to places where there really are people who have zero choice, zero opportunities, and are simply basically used to do a specific job, and the benefit of that work is experienced by people thousands of miles away.
Yeah, I get the point, and yeah, as I said, I know there's a lot of room. There is for sure room for improvement, but yeah, would be just a bit careful with thinking that's because someone is not paying taxes or something like this.
Yeah.
This is also a problem that we need to solve, but that's not the reason why we still have people in poverty and so on. And I do believe one thing is what I would like to have, one thing is what in my mind would be the perfect world, and the other thing is what's possible. And in my perfect world, I would love not to have people living in poverty conditions or in yeah. Reality is that I don't think we will have that day that we wake up and everybody's rich, or at least not say rich, but not living within poverty conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be rich either.
No, yeah.
So that's not the issue. But yeah, look, I get your point, Vlad. I really do.
And the things that it's also important to know that the state is also limited, right? It's like even if you have the best government state ever, like really working as the perfect well-oiled machine and so on, people they have also a responsibility on their own that you cannot do that much there, right? You don't know what conditions people can have, why they are not I don't know, going to school, or they are not responsible, or so that's also a thing that we should not forget, because what I'm if we see also, like, learning from history, when the state tried to be that big, like controlling everything, let's say with good intentions, it wasn't always the best idea.
Yeah, clearly mistakes were made. I mean, I'm not in any way here advocating on autocracy or any particular kind of dictatorship, but I think that there is a greater role there for the state if indeed there is a very clear benefit to society. And the problem we always come down to is the misuse of power, is inherent corruption. Because even in, for example, the Soviet Union, whenever I've spoken to people who lived in the Soviet times, very few people had actually had the wealth that they perhaps have today. And I'm not talking about the oligarchs, obviously, but the only way that people could get ahead in Soviet times was by taking things from the factory which they produced and selling it on the black market.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's simply, society simply did not have or did not create enough wealth through the system for people to be able to live adequately. There was always, shortages of electricity, shortages of hot water, shortages of bread. I remember, I had one of my sort of great aunties. She lived there, and she said she always had to queue up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to get a loaf of bread so that her family could eat breakfast and lunch for that day. So, I completely understand that, these huge, state structures and instruments are not necessarily beneficial. And they do tend to lead to corruption for people to be able to survive, at least with a minimum amount of food and dignity. But there has to be a middle structure, as in, we've heard so many times, Vlad, that right-wing politicians, and I say right-wing, I don't mean extreme, I mean like conservative politicians, or market libertarians, say, no, the market has to remain free. The market has to decide. But the market never decides.
True.
Yeah, it's the powerful organizations within the market that decide. Yeah, but wouldn't we rather have a country which is governed by an organization that's been elected by the people to make those decisions, rather than some selective companies which have basically managed to either monopolize or manipulate an entire system? Because that's just completely, throwing, rubbish in the face of the people. The market has never decided. Sorry.
Yeah, no, true, totally with you. But but I'm not sure if we would go the other way around. Like, you elect someone to really decide that. I wouldn't be sure if that would be a good idea, or at the end it would be even worse.
Yeah. So it comes down to humanity's inability to see a clear path towards, I suppose, in this case, responsible social governance. But if that's the case, what about the current, should we say, need for sustainable development? Who's going to take care of that? Because clearly, companies have known about some of the damage that they've done to the climate for 50 or 60 years in some cases, but they didn't give a shit. And it's only now that governments have finally jumped on board to talk about sustainable development and trying to limit the effects of climate change. So clearly, if we leave things to companies or to the market to decide, they don't give a shit.
Yeah, that's well, this is a very radical opinion, because I think that you don't know, you not only have like Amazon, Microsoft, and so on. You also have like small companies that have less than 200 employees, and this is actually the backbone of modern economies, right? So I really do believe that the social impact is very positive from people running business, entrepreneurs, and so on, and we are giving huge corporations an importance that they don't even deserve, because I think we are exaggerating a bit with the impact that they could have on society and so on. And they are also part of society, and they are also humans, and they are also people running that companies. And yeah, I don't know if it's clear my point, but
No, you're absolutely right, and I completely agree with you. But this is why I say, very few of those smaller companies, those SMEs, have been around for 50 or 60 years, and even fewer had a single concept of climate change in the 1950s and the 1960s. So I'm not referring to those. I am referring to those behemoths, which are your multinational organizations. These are the ones that had access to the information, and they decided to disregard it.
Yeah. I get it. Okay, so you were talking about giving a fair share. When you are talking about fair, what exactly? It's like you have the feeling they are giving something back that is enough to compensate what they are doing, or how would you measure it?
All right, I've always been taught that economics is the process by which society decides what, how, and for whom to produce. Okay.
Distribution of resources. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. So therefore, I would say that what is deemed fair to society depends on the society. However, society has to, at some point, make academic or scientific judgment on what is needed for society. And so, therefore, it will take what is needed for society by those individuals and organizations whose work is derived from that society. Okay, so for example, if I have a group of 5 people and I have a great idea, these 5 people work for me. With their effort, I make money. I have to pay them a fair wage. Okay, because yeah, I will probably take more because it was my idea, it's my process, it's my concept. But without them, it wouldn't work. And I know somebody would say to me, yeah, but then you just, yeah, if they don't want it, then you just get another 5 people. No, that doesn't always work that way.
Yeah.
Because then, and you know better than I do, how hard is it to recruit? How
Yeah.
hard is it to recruit the right people? Yeah. So if I've made a success with the first 5, I really don't want to have to change it. A, it's a pain in the ass to find a replacement, and B, you're never guaranteed that the person you replace somebody with is going to be the same.
Yeah. Yeah, totally true. I mean, that's a funny and interesting because actually all the companies we were talking before, like okay, having a too high impact in the future of the world and so on, normally they are well known for paying fair, and that's why people really would love to work at Amazon or Microsoft or all these Tesla and so on. You know, the usual suspects. So I guess this problem with people not paying that high is more in small companies, not always the case. But then I think that's the reason why you need then a minimum wage, because for sure I mean, there are some jobs where you don't need any kind of qualifications, and that's normal that people then don't get that higher salaries doing that. Like I don't know, like delivering food or let's say yeah, cleaning houses or so on. So then it's really important to have a minimum wage that it's well calculated, and then you know that if somebody is working 40 hours per week doing whatever they are doing, they for sure they have the right to live with dignity, and not only with dignity, like also like go on vacations, like buy clothes, like go to the theater or to the cinema and so on.
Mm. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But I mean, then again, there are also situations where you could say delivering food in a specific area does require a certain amount of knowledge, at least of the specific area. I mean, and now
Yeah, okay, but that's.
I'm just
I mean,
saying.
true. Okay, but it's not no rocket science. It's not like you need to go to university for 10 years before downloading Google Maps and putting the address and going there.
Yeah, okay, but we're talking about an urban environment, yeah. But what if, for example, I'm a delivery driver and I have to make deliveries in a rainforest to certain remote areas? Then I couldn't care less about Google this or Apple that. You need to be a real expert of that area to know where to go, at what time you should leave, and what kind of weather patterns you should pay attention to. So, I mean, I'm just saying that even in the, and you know it better than I do because you're from South America, and so therefore, where we're in Europe, where I live, or Berlin, we don't tend to get the kind of extreme weather conditions that somebody would perhaps get in South America, for
Yeah.
example. No? But yeah, I mean, look, the only correction I would make to the list of companies that you named when you're talking about fair payment, there are some jobs at Amazon which recently there have been lots of complaints about with regards to their pay structure. So lots of people that work in warehouses have complained about being underpaid, especially for the amount of work that's been expected of them. Antisocial hours, unfairly treated, disrespected, and so on. And I think this in itself should be like a package thing. Nobody has a right to disrespect another person just because they are lower down the food chain than they are within an
That's
organization.
absolutely, yeah, I'm totally with you. Well, the thing with Amazon and all these huge corporations is that you always will find negative cases, but you should never forget they are 2 million people, right?
Mm,
It's for sure that within 2 million you are going to find assholes that are acting as managers. You're going to find really cool people, you're going to find really bad people, and that's something you cannot avoid. And I know from the and I really know it, that they had already, before the new minimum wage was established here in Germany, they were already paying the same amount, so they were paying more than they were legally required to. And let's say such positions in warehouse and so on, this is what normally people get a minimum wage, because the let's say the job specific skills that you need to apply for such a position is like, okay, you need two hands.
mm. But I will simply counter that with a point that you made earlier. In some cases, it doesn't come down to money, it's structure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so therefore, this is why I look at systemic failures. So whether that is systemic failure in rooting out racism, or systemic failure in gender bias issues, and other kinds of discrimination. I think it's a form of discrimination to underpay people. Now, whether or not that is deliberate, or by a certain individual, that's a different matter. But if the entire system is not built in a way to protect these kinds of people, then the system needs to look at itself. Yeah, there's no way that one individual manager in one of these larger companies can get away with doing some of the stuff that they clearly have got away with. It just shouldn't happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Right. As in, mean, you are a human resources manager. Yeah.
Yeah.
If somebody in your company has been either verbally or physically or sexually abused, but they don't want to come to talk to you because they're afraid of losing their job, would you not agree that that is a structural failure within the
Sure.
organization?
Sure. And I guess I wouldn't work in such a company.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
But so many people don't have the choice that you do, Vlad.
That's true, and that's why I really believe in the let's say power of well-structured rules, and yeah, and the things that the legal system, all the laws there are always in a beta mode. It's like there's not gonna be the day that you wake up and you say, okay, we have all law that we need, we have all rules already defined. It's something that with every single year, with every single decade, you are facing new challenge as a society, as a private sector, and so on. So I would be just yeah, I am like focusing my energy in having a very good structural legal system, that we have a good minimum wage and so on. Because one thing I love, like 90% of everything what you are saying, but the 1% that I don't like is that you are proposing some rules, but then you already know that these rules are not going to be enough, so you want to create some behavior expectations that, I mean, if you cannot control people with rules, then it's going to be even more complicated with to organize it with expectations.
Yeah, of course. As people who observe and study human behavior, so politics, society, and so on, I have to accept that you could have the world's best rule, one individual rule, which everybody will say that's fantastic. 100% of the people would say that's a fantastic rule. And yet you would still have a certain percentage who will go out and try to break that rule. Yeah. And that is humanity.
Yeah.
We cannot escape that fact. Humans are unpredictable. Humans are curious. I could be the world's biggest law-abiding person, but I will say, do you know what? I'm so curious to see what will happen if I break this rule, that I will go out and break that rule just to see what the consequences are. Or because maybe I'm a thrill seeker and I want to live on the edge, and ask you, wow, what are they going to do to me if I do this? How are they going to catch me? You
Yeah.
know? So there are always these kinds of people within society. So no system is going to control everyone.
Yeah, the thing, we see the same problem. I only guess we have a different approach because that was actually one of my first point. I was straight talking about the penal system, about how to organize the justice system. What if people um, are not acting according the constitution, the rules, and so on. So I know the problem, but my solution is then to have well structured penal system where I know, okay, if someone is not acting according the rules of the society that we define together, then it's gonna be punished in a way that he can or she can be reintegrated to society at some point. And that's why I was talking about, okay, such a person shouldn't have they have the right to vote. Such a person will have also like not only a punishment in terms of going to prison or paying something, but also a social one. And that's what for me it's really important, right?
Mm.
And yeah, so it means that we both see and acknowledge the problem, but maybe we are different with expectations. I would do it more with a penal system. You are doing it more like increasing the expectations of society. The things that I don't know how much power you will have to because that's so cool that you're expecting that. But I know if I don't think Jeff Bezos is going to listen to our podcast. Who knows, maybe. But it's not that he's gonna change that. He's gonna change something because he listens to your ideas. But if we together create a penal system where, okay, if you don't do it, then you will have problems with the system. Then it's a different thing.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that I would like to start my system with focusing on education, but education will only look after the next generation or the generation after. And, we've still got 15 or 20 years with this generation that we need to take care of. That requires different measures.
Yeah,
Um, mm,
that's true, but that's also a very complicated topic. We can, if you want, like have a session only talking about education, because I love education. This is that's actually the things that I enjoy the most. That I enjoy the most is learning, buying books, educating myself. But we have to be very clear with the expectation management, and from time to time we tend to overestimate education. So. It was one of the things also during the past century that we start believing that education is the solution for everything. And now, if you compare like statistics, like okay, we have now people with more access to educations, we have people that have better education standards, but poverty is the same. So educating is a beautiful thing, but I would still think in the solution is somewhere else.
mhm. Yeah, it does depend what problem you're trying to address. But yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. I mean, if it's poverty, then education has helped in some ways, but
yeah,
not universally. Um, yeah, and just one other thing, because you've made no comment on it, so I should bring it up. At the end of that point number 6, I say
yeah,
whether they are able to communicate or not. And the ones that are not able to communicate, I mean non-human. So I'm referring to the animal kingdom. I'm referring to plants and trees. I'm referring to other living creatures. Um, we have to, as a part of the ecosystem in which we exist, we have to take into consideration the needs of, our cohabitants.
yeah, yeah. Totally agree. I I didn't get the point at the first time you say it. I was thinking you were talking about some communities that they're because of their status they are not really uh, present, or they don't have the representation that they for sure deserve. So I was
Mm,
thinking you were talking more about let's say communities that which conditions are not the best. But yeah,
mm,
totally agree. Yeah, for sure. I
yeah.
mean, we have to take care of the planet, of everything, and because otherwise, yeah, if we don't do anything in that direction, that at some point we are gonna die as a race. So yeah.
But I would also say sometimes the best thing we can do is to do nothing, and which is to stay out of certain areas and to allow these areas their own opportunities to grow, should we say, hindered by human curiosity.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, what you were talking about, like, for example, in the, you don't need to start the, I don't know, doing some crazy research in the middle of the jungle if it's not necessary, because the only thing that you are gonna create is a negative impact on the ecosystem right there and so on.
Exactly.
So, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Cool.
it's totally agree, but I know also there are some points that are critical, because I know we need resources, and now if we would say, okay, we stop doing now everything what we did, then countries like Germany will remain the way they are, the way they are, and that's cool. But countries like Sierra Leona or I don't know which poor country in Africa would be the same. So I know that's a bit critical, like expecting now being totally green from every single country in the world. That's it's a bit complicated. It's a bit could be also seen or understood as not fair.
Yeah. We kind of touched on this also in our sort of previous podcasts, and so therefore I wouldn't take it down that line. Though we can have another session where we have a chat basically about the inequality of climate policies which are being forced on certain countries, considering the histories of the countries that are making the demands and the companies the countries that are being expected to adhere to those demands. So clearly there is a level of inequality there which has to be addressed as well, and we'll look at that. But yeah, cool. Vlad, what can I say? I have a feeling that time is running short, but I have to say I so enjoy the opportunities that we have of analyzing things, and I love the fact that you never 100% agree with me, and you always say it's 99% that you agree, but it feels like a lot less that you agree. But that's cool. Yeah, I just want to say that I enjoy it, and it's good.
It's always a pleasure to have this kind of conversations with you, and I really enjoy that. I mean, the things that we see the problems and we know we need a solutions. It's just that we have maybe different approaches, but I really love that we have like this common thing, that we really know where we want to go. We really know what it's or what we consider is good for people, and it's for sure fantastic to know different approaches, and challenge that you challenge my point of view and the other way around as well. So yeah, thank you very much. It's for sure a pleasure doing that with you.
Cool. I've got such a big smile on my face. I'm gonna look forward to listening to this again when I do the editing. Vlad, thank
Cool.
you very much, my man. It's great. You're brilliant. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Take care. Bye.